Okay. Well, I guess that Jim isn't going to make it. Well, I should have known that by 10 o'clock or he would have been here. So we don't have our minutes for the last meeting, but we do have a treasurer's report. Do you want to give the treasurer's report, David?
I can. There's a mistake on it. I think I can correct it here.
Okay.
The beginning balance of the checking was $7,038. We had dues of $552. We had payouts for to Luke for editorial expenses of $50. So that leaves a checking balance $7,016. The CD beginning balance was $8,681. We had $2 of interest. So the CD balance is $8,682 and total money is $16,225.
Okay. Thanks, David. Yeah, Ruth sent that out yesterday. So we appreciate her sending that. Now, under it's old business, just want to remind everyone that we're going to go ahead and have our Christmas dinner next month. And it will be at the Stillwell Depot rather than Proctor.
Oh, okay.
So Wanda decided I needed to drive a little bit further down the road. Not much.
Stayed at home a long time.
Yes. So hopefully we'll have a good turnout for that, because as I've told everyone, I appreciate all of you all keeping us going the last couple of years. And my intention, if we approve it, is to possibly have in-person meetings quarterly and the other meetings by Zoom. Okay. Well, do we have any other old business to cover?
Does anyone know how Mary Bell is doing?
Yes. Curtis gave us an update a little bit earlier. Curtis, want to tell us again for those who weren't here?
Well, her son says that she's gaining strength slowly but surely. She's on her walker and doing some things on her own. She don't like the food, but he sneaks her in McDonald's and things he fixes at home. So, but it's going to be a while, he says.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Curtis. Do we have any other old business? Or do we have any new business to cover? Do you have anything, David? You're on mute.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, we're happy to have Mike Wren with us again, because he always gives us lots and lots of good information. So I think everyone knows Mike and all of his extensive research on Cherokees. He's retired this last year and has been keeping busy. And he lives in Atlanta. So another advantage of Zoom, he's able to join us and speak with us. And he's worked extensively with the Trail of Tears Association to help get the 1838 claims up and running. So I will turn it over to Mike.
All right. Cool. I'm excited to be here. And yes, I agree. I like Zoom a lot. All right. So if things mess up, somebody tell me. Let's see. This come up?
Yes, it did.
Okay. So today is going to be, I'm going to call this a training workshop, not a presentation. So if you want to unmute and you want to ask questions along the way, that's fine. This is very, very informal. So So we may go forward and backwards and we may jump off. Some of this Andy heard earlier, but no, it's going to be totally different than what Andy heard last weekend. Last weekend, I gave a similar talk to the Tennessee chapter of the Trail of Tears, and it was presented from the perspective of somebody in the East. These are mostly people who live in the East in Tennessee and who are researching. From this perspective, we're going to start from Goingsnake. So Glenda the Good Witch said, it's always best to start at the beginning. And the beginning is out west. You're working from out west to back east. We're not going to follow any yellow brick road, though. We're going to follow what we know. So you start from the point that you know in research and work toward what you don't know. So for most of you guys, it's the 1842 claims. That's kind of your one first clue for where somebody may have come in from the east. So this is a list of 1842 claims where the claimants said they were connected to Candy's Creek. Now, why did you pick Candy's Creek, Mike? Why are we going to talk about that? Because I don't know anything about Candy's Creek. I know nothing, really. I've heard of it. I've heard other people talk about it, but I don't really know anything about it. My knowledge was mostly Alabama and a little bit in Georgia and a little bit in Tennessee, but not a depth of knowledge. So you may have, you know, an ancestor, an aunt, uncle, somebody that has mentioned that the family came from Candy's Creek. So this becomes one of the first things that you may find that points back east. Now, if you're like me, I know geography, but I don't know geography great, particularly if it's not where I've lived. So you look for a map, and you find a map from pre-removal, and it lists Candy's Creek on it. You'll see it right there, flowing from the south to the north, Hiawassee River. Now, if you get really lucky, you find an old map. This is an 1836 map that, and it's hard to read, but it was the first map of Bradley County, Tennessee. And District 1, which is over here, you can't read this very well, but that's Candy's Creek. We're not going to go deep into this map, but it shows different places right here at Grasshopper. I don't remember which one, if I can see it. One of them is Willie O. Mall's School. So there's lots of geographic references on this map. So part of your background work that you're doing when you're trying to get from west to east, and you see places named Candy's Creek, or you see places, other places, is those become geographical references. Where matters, place matters, references to places matter. Luke, side note, somebody's waiting in the waiting room to come in. Do I have to let them in? I will. Anyway, so this is just, you need to, when you're doing research, familiarize yourself with the geography as much as you can. And this is just another example. Now, the next thing you guys would run into would be the 1835 census. And this is an image of, and if you don't have a copy of the Oklahoma chapter 1835 census, Curtis will sell you a copy. It's probably one of the best money I ever spent in my whole life. But this is what the original roll looks like, and it's full of lots of information. And this covers Candy's Creek, parts of it. So don't just settle with a list of names. Don't stop there. So this is all the references to Candy's Creek in the 1835 census, and it comes in 3 sections. There's a section that says Candy's Creek, Hamilton County. Candy's Creek was never in Hamilton County. So that's a clue for something. The next section is Candy's Creek in McMinn. McMinn was a county that had jurisdiction before Bradley County was formed. And then there's another gap. Also, you go from number 112 to 163. So now, and I put things on here just because of other research, that you see names, and names, if there are a million different ways to spell names, particularly Cherokee names. They're spelled phonetically and they're misspelled phonetically. And they had multiple names and they're known by different things. And, you know, somebody who's transcribing has to transcribe what's on the piece of paper. But there can be an error in an old record. So Jack Luck, number 169, is probably Jack Leach. That's the way the name shows up in other records. So you always need to keep your eyes open and be thinking. Number 166, Runaway, is in some records he's called Runner. In some records he's called Running Backwards. And he's down here on the bottom. So don't get too legalistic about names. Number 2, a reference to a creek may only be a reference generally. And it may mean the waters of Candy's Creek, which is a whole drainage basin. So don't think automatically they lived on the bank of the creek. They lived in some kind of drain, probably. That's my impression of the 1835 census. It's more of a regional area definition. I live in Atlanta, but I don't really live in Atlanta. I live in a separate city called Sandy Springs. But I say I live in Atlanta. But also I have a neighborhood that I live on in a street, a cul-de-sac. And I may refer to any of those as my address, depending on how I interpret the question somebody's asking me. So just because you see a specific, what you think is a very specific nailed down geographic reference, doesn't necessarily mean what you think it means. So don't assume too much. Now, don't just stop at looking at the list of names. I took all the people who were listed in the 1835 census and did a profile of the neighborhood. So there were 36 households that were listed as being in McMinn and 20 that were mentioned as being in Hamilton, 56 total households. In that group of people, households, families, communities, neighbors, there were 71 males over 18 and 85 females over 16. 96 males under 18, 95 females under 16. There were 19 male slaves and 23 female slaves, and they were held by 7 households. There were 13 intermarried whites, 1 mixed Catawba, 1 mixed Negro. Of the Cherokee, 162 full bloods, 112 half bloods, 70 quarter bloods, and 1 who was simply left out of the count. Okay, if you look at Candy's Creek compared to the rest of Tennessee in the Cherokee Nation, they represented 404 human beings out of a group of 3,000. So they're you know, maybe what, 13% of the Cherokee population in Tennessee. So you're looking for specific ancestors, but you want to see your ancestors in context. Who are their friends? Who are their neighbors? Who are their family? And who are the people that you don't know their names yet? So you got 56 households in the census. So if you only look at that, you only have 56 names. You don't have the other 290 names of who was there. So there were 56 households, 233 houses, 54 farms, which total 1,247 acres. So you're looking for people, you're looking for families, you're looking for neighbors, but you're looking at community. Who are these group of people? Now, we're going to show all kinds of different stuff today, and this is a good resource. It's at the Newberry Library, and if we're living right, this will work, and if we're not, that'll be my luck. Let's see, we'll do a new share here. All right. There. Okay, this is a map they have, and it shows county boundaries. So if Andy were to talk to me about where she lives in California, I'm gonna tell you, I wouldn't know if that was Northern California, Southern California, it was the interior valley, or she lived on the coast at all. So when you're looking at the records and they start mentioning places, this is a good resource. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but you need to always get kind of an idea of records. So let's see. Okay, here. All right, so this is on the 10th of February, 1836. You see Bradley. So you can see that was originally McMinn, and then Bradley was carved out, later Polk County. But that's a good resource if you don't really know much of anything about when counties were formed and when they were split off and what was split off. Here's a list just of Bradley County of all the different locations named that I've been able to find, whether in the register of payments, the censuses, claims. You get a list of all the different things. Now, sometimes they're general references, sometimes they're waterway references, sometimes they're regional references. Sometimes they overlap into different counties and different areas. So kind of familiarize yourself with the area. So you're mostly interested in Candies Creek, but you don't know what else you don't know. You know, it's the old saying is, you don't know that you don't know what you don't know. You're simply ignorant. So you don't know which of these, when you're starting off, really matter that much. Now, this is another one of my favorite websites of all times, and we'll play on this a little bit. Okay, this is the U.S. Board of Geographic Names domestic search page. And not many people ever use this, but this particularly helps when you're looking for stuff, not where you are. So what we're going to do is we are going to search domestic names. Did the map come up? Okay, good. I'm lucky.
Yep.
So you have different options over here. This is one that I tend to use the most, Topo. And here is Candies Creek. Now you can click this right here and it will lay out the topo map sections if you're interested in that. You can, they have that option, they have a hybrid option, they have images only. But to start off, we're going to look at that, because what we're going to look for in this is we're going to look for Candies Creek, which is right here. And we're interested in what waterways are tributaries to Candies Creek. So you can go over here on the left, and we're going to pick the state of Tennessee. And we're going to narrow down just to Bradley County. And we're going to search for places. There's Candies Creek. So we're going to pin Candies Creek. And I'm going to zoom out so you can see. It's going to put pins that show the course of Candies Creek. Now we're going to go up and down the creek. Let's see, lost it, here it is. And just look, and what do you see around it? There's Wolfteaver Creek. Now, if you see the little pin right here, it's in blue, that's the default color. You can go in and change that to a different color. And you're going to look for, what else do I see? Candies Creek. Over here, see right there, Taylor's. What's it called? Taylor. Taylor Branch. I'll make that one purple. Here's Dry Creek. Didn't mean to hit that. All right. Drumgoole Creek. Here's a creek called Harris Creek.
Yeah, that is where Herr Conrad's house is still located.
There you go. Jack's ahead of me.
There's on current maps, they've corrupted Harris Creek to Harris Creek.
So if you see this thing right here that says summary, if you click on that, which I didn't mean to do a while ago, and you will look here, it says variant name, Hares Creek and Hare Creek. So you may not see a name in the database or see it on the map, but they may have it inside the database. So Jack is right. Yeah, this is Hares Creek. You can look at, so we'll keep looking up. Runner. Runner Branch, who was running backwards or run. Let's see, deep orange, not that. And I see Bugsby. Yeah, no, I forget how they spell it. Let me spell that. Ugly. See if I can find the spelling. Bigsby. Great. And let's do White Oak. White Oak. So you pull out, once you kind of look through all that, and you see here is White Oak Mountain, the yellow, this amber right here, this was Hares Creek. The blue lines is Candy's Creek. Gray was Bigsby's Creek. So these all, they're in the east. Cherokee names survive, often corrupted, but they will survive. And those will be clues, geographic clues. So instead of saying my ancestors were from the east to now my ancestors were from Candy's Creek. Well, there's a whole slew of different waterways that can be called part of Candy's Creek. So if your hope, as Jack said, is to get back to a specific location, you need to understand the specific locations.
Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, when you originally searched for Candy's Creek and then you start searching for other terms, was it defaulting to these places that were attaching to Candy's Creek, or
No, I was simply looking at the map, David, right here,
Yeah,
and just say, okay, let me find Candy's Creek.
so it wasn't just picking
No,
specific
no.
ones that were by.
And there's websites that have watersheds connected to them, and that probably would, but I just kind of went up and down Candy's Creek, and then I see this little branch and it says Taylor. So that's probably somebody in the Taylor family. This is Dry Creek, which I've seen mentioned in this one right here, this lime green one is Drumgools Creek, which is a very short. And you'll see over here is South Mouse Creek. Let's mark that one too. Now, it's not part of Candy's Creek, but it parallels it. And you'll say, let's pin it. What color have I not used? Not light blue. And here's Little Chautauqua Creek. So let's do a little. Oh, no.
What color did you put Mouse Creek?
It's a light blue. I may change that. I don't think it doesn't contrast enough. Go back to this is South Mouse and Little Mouse. Let's do Indigo. So you can see Mouse and South Mouse right here. Candy's is right here. White Oak Mountain is here. Now, as you start looking at other stuff, these kind of things are going to matter. Kind of where is close to where. So I can play on that site for hours.
I have a cousin who just bought a house. The back of his property is on Mouse Creek. And
Wow.
trying to determine how close that was to where our family was.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to that. We'll look at one other thing. Maybe think of that. Thank you for saying something. Is we're going to go to this. So this is basically, is a photograph. So let's find Jack Harris Creek. Okay, here. Now this is for you to just you kind of observe, what do you see? Well, if there's no field there today, there probably wasn't a field there in 1836. Now, there may be fields that weren't there, but if you're looking at this and you look at the terrain and you look at the layout and you see these big masses, these mills, and if you go to a hybrid, you can see that. And if you look at, and you look where the trees are, you couldn't farm there. You couldn't have fields, you couldn't have orchards. You might have a house sitting up on a mountain, but you wouldn't have any water to drink unless there was a seasonal spring up there for some particular reason. So you're going to find that Cherokee and later white settlers lived where there was arable land, where there was flat land, and where there was water. So when you look at the images, there wasn't a Cherokee living right there in 1836. They wouldn't have been. They had to live based on the geography that was in front of them. So you can play with this a lot and start getting a little bit better picture for exactly where an ancestor may have lived. Okay.
Mike, is there a place on this map that would show trails? How they would get, let's
Well,
say, from the fort to where they lived?
there are, and I'm not an expert in Tennessee resources. I have heard, and Jack can correct me or David, that the surveys, and this was called the Ocoee district, not the Hiwassee, but the Ocoee district, and the surveys for the Ocoee district are missing, lost, or stolen. If that's true, I don't know,
Okay.
but that's what I've heard. And I don't know if there are any alternates. All right, so these are images from the valuation book that covers Bradley County. And the one on the left is Samuel Foreman, who was, and this says he was a quarter Cherokee, lived on Candies Creek in Bradley County. The one on the right is Alexander Drumgoole. Now, just as a point of reference, all the appraisals in this book are dated. So if you're going to start looking, you start looking and say, okay, on October 3rd, how many appraisals were done and who were these people? Those are the people who are going to be the closest neighbors to your ancestors. An appraiser isn't going to walk or ride a horse 50 miles in one direction and come back in the same day. They're going to try to be as efficient in doing their jobs as they can. And they are going to move in a geographic pattern. They're going to move in a certain direction. Now, the direction they move in is probably not the same direction that the census taker moved in. Again, while you need to pay attention to where were the fields, where were the mountains, how would you walk, how would you travel, where would people live? So this is the calendar for October of 1836. All of the valuations for Candies Creek and these other tributary streams were done in October. All in a 7-day period. So if you look at it, and I made a chart based on days. Now the 2nd was a Sunday, the 9th was a Sunday, and the 16th was a Sunday. No valuations were done that day. So on the 1st, they were at White Oak Flat. Sunday, they didn't value. The next day, they were in Candies Creek. They did 9. The 4th, they did 3. The 5th, they did 7. On the 6th, there was none stated as Candies Creek, but there were at White Oak Mountain, which was basically the headwaters of Hares Creek. And Hares Creek and Bigby Creek and Wolftiver Creek, which is now called Wolftiver Creek. On the 7th, all the valuations were on Candies Creek. On the 8th, all the valuations were on Candies Creek, except 2 that were also on Wolftiver. None were done the next Sunday. Then they had 12 on Monday for Candies Creek and 1 on Qualahola Creek. And on the 8th, there were 11, and then 2 on Wolftiver. The next day was Sunday. On the 10th, there were 12, Candies Creek, and then 1 at Quahola. And then on the 11th, 2 on Candies Creek, 1 on Mouse Creek. So probably this is the point when they moved to the east just a little bit and headed up South Mouse Creek. And then they're at Quahola, Mouse Creek, Mouse Creek, Mouse Creek, Mouse Creek. So there's a geographic pattern in the way the valuing agent moves and where they were at specific times. So you kind of have to look through everything. You want to maybe even look at the week before this and the week after this. Where were they going? Because it'll make the patterns come out to you. Now, not all the names are written are Anglo names. All of these were names where they gave a name in syllabary, which I cannot read and I cannot translate. But if somebody does, it would be a good thing to sit and look at this and say, is Talagolusti or 2 fathom, how does that name right there in syllabary translate to somebody who's actually fluent in Cherokee, who could read it and translate the name? Because you could get, as I said, runner, running backwards, and running away. There's lots of different ways somebody in English may refer to a name, but knowing the full name may help you understand a little bit better that person and realize some record that you've seen that you didn't really pay attention to might actually be that person. You just ignored it because you were looking for runner and it said running backward.
Mike, one of the things I think I noticed is on the previous page with the English names,
Mm-hmm.
the amounts were much greater than these with the full blood names. Have you
Yeah.
seen that as a pattern?
Yeah. Oh, Patsy, you are very good. Keep watching. So that's one of the things you get to do. So this is, I just did a chart of part of the things. So you can look, and these were the days, first name, last name, that was the measurements of the house, if it was 1 story or 2, how many square feet that comes out to, how are they valued, and what does that come out to a value per square foot? You're a real estate appraiser. And you take that. Now this is rough, this is really rough. So this is not science, this is more art. But you go, okay, well, how much square feet does that come out to per person? Well, a million things can happen, you know, in a week. So these are 2 different snapshot dates, but you start to get an idea. Now, the things that will affect value are, is it a round log cabin? Was the bark on the round logs scraped off, or was it simply rough? Was it a hewed log cabin? Now, a hewed log, it's a flat-sided, it's called an adze, I think, I don't remember, but it's a flat-sided, and they basically chop the edges of logs off to make them square. Well, a hewed log cabin is much more valuable because it was a lot more costly from a labor standpoint to build. It was a more substantial house. It was more apt that it would survive longer. A 2-story house was much more valuable than a 1-story house, or 2 1-story houses with the same square foot. So if you have a square foot of X number of feet, you have more family members, you know, your daughter marries and her husband comes and moves with you, they would tend to build another small cabin. So you had 56 households and you had 230 houses, which means that a family could have multiple small houses in a compound rather than having one huge, the Waltons kind of humongous house that everybody lived in. But the bigger the house, the more substantial it is, the better it was constructed, the more it's going to end up being valued per square feet. Now, if you're looking at a neighborhood, and this is not to compare, but there would be a wide variety of people. Some of them were relatives. Some of these may be older people who only needed a small place to live. Some of them could have been a young family starting out. So don't read too much into relative values, but it's just something to say, why is this person's home more valuable than this person's home?
Mike, where are these valuations?
These right here for this is on a National Archives microfilm. It's microfilm A18. It just happens to be one. There was a lady with the Tennessee chapter, Debbie Moore, who actually transcribed them and published them. The University of Georgia is right now in the process of I gave them digital copies of what I had, transcribing them. They'll put them in a database. They've contracted with someone in Washington, D.C. to go in and make brand new scans of everything from the originals. And they're going to put it all online. So it's not yet, but eventually they will all be online and searchable.
Mike, will that be on the University of Georgia website or Galileo?
I don't know yet. I mean, I've gone on and looked at what they've done so far, and it's going to be cool. And you can, you know, I've said this before. Here you go. Here is, who is this? Bendabout. Here, you look, he has a huge log cabin, 13 by 18. And if you look at I'm trying to find somebody who's got a small one. This one over here is a round log cabin, 12 by 12. A round log cabin is easier to construct than a huge log cabin. So you kind of have to look at what's being valued and how much is it worth. This is a list from the registers of payments, which is a different resource. This is also, the originals are up there. But it is anybody who said they were in, and this is why you went to the map and you tried to learn all the waterways, is some of these people are listed on the 1835 census as being at Candies Creek, but their accounts, register of payments accounts, and their evaluations say Red Clay Council Ground, or they say White Oak Mountain, or they say Hares Creek, or they say Mouse Creek, or they say Greasy Creek, or they say some other tributary or close by location. So instead of being this huge region that says Candies Creek, you go, if they say Candies Creek on this, but on this one they say Hares Creek, well, now you're into a 5-mile segment of where they would have been.
Mike, I have another question. I noticed you said the hewed log was more valuable. I believe it was valued at about $150.
Yeah.
What, if that had been a white person's cabin, do we have any idea what it would have been appraised at?
I do not. You know, I have, this is one of those things, Patsy, I have my suspicions, and
Yeah.
I don't have enough proof to back them up yet, but I suspect things were undervalued.
That was what I was getting at.
So, you know, that's kind of until you do, this is kind of the stuff that you go, okay, all this stuff is finally being digitized, it's made available online. And this is where, to me, scholars and researchers can sit down and say, you know, hey, look at this. Hey, compared to this. Now, part of this is when you get into, you know, market forces. If there's a gazillion houses being sold, the value of a house goes down, you know, inventory. But that's not how they were supposed to be valued. They were supposed to be valued at their fair value. So that's my suspicion. Same with the claims, and I think I mentioned that when we talked, you know, on the TOTA seminar, is that I think the underpinnings of the 1838 claims were that we didn't get a fair price. I didn't get a fair price on the appraisal. I didn't get a fair price on my sporulation claim. These are wrong. This is not fair. This is not right. You know, there were 4 different boards of Cherokee commissioners, and they did, as, in my opinion, when I read it, I'll see some things that were approved and some were disapproved. And I go, the thing was disapproved has more proof to it than the thing that was approved. And I think you're slanting because these people were treaty party. That's just me. That's anecdotal. There's not enough evidence that I could prove that, I think, yet. But I think
For them or against them?
Usually against them. I think sometimes you know, all you can do is look at what's in front of your eyes, and you'll see a claim. I've seen claims from treaty party people, and they would be approved. And then I would see a very similar claim from you know, a Ross Party person, and it gets rejected. And I go, there's more evidence for it on this side than there is over here. Why? So I think there was bias, and I think there was this is on the part of the U.S. an intentional, unspoken order, or at least I haven't found the paper trail yet, that save money. Deny. But that's something I think, Patsy, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be enough evidence that smart young people like Kirsten are going to be able to go into all this and start doing analysis and go, yeah, here's a smoking gun. Here are first board sporulation claims. So there are lots of claims. There's lots of information. So, you know, from the standpoint of you guys, you do your genealogy and you'll read, you know, an Eastern Cherokee application, and they'll refer to a relation, to a cousin, an aunt, or somebody who left note, and you don't find them anywhere. Well, they may be listed somewhere as a witness in one of these claims. That may be the only proof. You know, there aren't very many records out west, you know, post-removal up until post-Civil War. But you will find within some of these claims, witnesses, names mentioned that only that are referred to in some relations Eastern Cherokee claim. Okay, these are the districts. So if you don't know the geography and the legal boundaries of the Cherokee Nation, you need to make yourself as aware as you can. Now, this is the Ocoee district, which covered a large part of Tennessee, but also Georgia. The Ocoee district had a little bit in Tennessee. The Ocoee district had a little bit in Tennessee, and the Chickamauga district had a little in Tennessee. And none of the records refer to these except for the 1838 claims. So everything else is going to say Bradley County. It's going to say Wills Valley, Alabama. It's going to say something that refers to modern legal geography. So go ahead.
Pardon me, sir.
No.
Ocoee County, or that area, is that district? Is that the same as on the previous page? There was a place called Ocoee, which means water, and this I assume means the water place, or it could mean salt place, depending on how you pronounce it. Ocoee is the residence for Sally, number 3, volume 3, rather.
3. Yeah. Probably is, yes. One of the things, Bob, that you always need to remember is nobody really knows how some of these names were supposed to be pronounced, how they were pronounced, how they should be spelled. A lot of them are corrupted. Certainly, you know, in modern English Eastern names. I don't know really where Ocoee came from. Jack may know. I know a town and a location. Chattooga is a creek and a waterway. Etowah is also called Hightower. It's how the name was. Now people say Etowah, but it's actually Itawa. So Hightower with an English corruption of Itawa. Kusawati was a place in the river. But I don't know where the names actually came from or what they mean. This is a closer view, and you see that these don't really match to any current legal county locations. And I don't know anybody who's ever really tried to put that onto a map so that you could look and see, okay, these people could be in this county or this county. So now we're going to look at the 1838 claims. Now, this is now when you approach this, these are really clunky claims to use, but they're claims given from the Cherokee perspective. We were unhappy with the valuations. We're unhappy with what we got paid. We don't like any of this at all. So we are going to go to the claims. I'm going to do a new share of this. So this is the Trail of Tears database. And you can go here and you know this is where you want to be, this district. There are 311 of these claims that mentioned Ocoee as the district where the person lived. And I wish I could tell you there is an easier way, but there isn't. You just kind of have to go through. And it's the safest way because sometimes the claims will say Tennessee and sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll simply say the district. Sometimes they'll give a waterway. But at this point, because you did your background, you did all, you looked at your 1842 claims, and you looked at the census, and you've looked at everything else. Now, in this second one, you go Thomas Crawling Snake, Running Backwards, and Bellows. It doesn't say Candies Creek anywhere, but these are all names that are connected to Candies Creek. Here's John Leach, who I said was John Luck in the census. He says he lived at White Oak Mountain. So if you don't know that White Oak Mountain is the watershed boundary of Candies Creek and all its tributaries, you would go, well, what does that mean? Well, it means it probably lived somewhere close to that mountain. And there are lots of fields at the bottom of the mountains. Here's somebody at Chautauqua Creek. Here's simply somebody who was in Ocoee District, Waukeia Town, Tennessee Town, Ocoee, Mike Talker, Buzzard Town, Duck Town, and here's somebody from Candies Creek. One of the big challenges for any research in genealogy, and I think as much or more so for Cherokee, is women. How do you identify women? How do you identify female ancestors? How do you identify women? So here's one where you look at this, and blow this up. And this is not in the database, but it's something that you can look at, is most people sign with their marks, which was probably syllabary originally. Chudar Yul Tar, his mark, Crowmacher, his mark, Chawayuker, her mark. So she was probably a sister or a wife or a daughter of the claimant, certainly a neighbor. So you look for every little clue that you can find. But I would not recommend you jump into this if you haven't at least done some base research on the community where you're going to be researching, because it's easy to get overwhelmed. Young Duck and Daniel Pigeon, who are on Candies Creek. Young Duck is listed in the valuations, but I don't think Pigeon is. Another Young Duck, Daniel Pigeon, Waddy. There's one right here. There's from Candies Creek. Bellows, who is listed in the census and in the valuations, and Stan Shell, who's listed. But I don't know that Tunahi was, unless it was one of the alternate spellings. So Cherokee names can be spelled multiple ways, and they can be misspelled even more ways. So you really have to only think about phonetics and the syllables. You know, you'll see in these, they're the same person, it'll be syllabized very differently. So until you get enough feel for it, you know, the last thing to do is to try to simply search on a name. Here's one for Harris Creek, and it is Mike Waters. And besides David and Jack, who knows who Mike Waters is? He's Sequoia's brother-in-law. He lived on here it's called Harris Creek, or it was written down as Harris Creek here. And Samuel Candy and Arch Murphy were his claimants. And you give,
Excuse me, I might add that Per Conrad, of course, was married to Samuel Candy's daughter, Ollie, and his home was built on Samuel Candy's reservation. And Samuel Candy Jr. was nearby there also. So there were several family members that were built their homes by this time on the reservation with Samuel Candy.
and that's a good point, Jack. And I think you always need to remember this and whether this is, you're talking about Anglo families or you're talking about Cherokee families, there was no, national social safety net. Your social safety net was your family. Your social safety net in Cherokee was also your clan. So you were near, if you became sick and died, it was your clan and your family's responsibility to take care of your children. They weren't turned over to the state. So that's what I say, when you're doing this, always pay attention to who's close by. You may not know them to be a relation, but the odds are they probably are. It could be a male married to a sister, or a male married to a cousin, or a male married to your mother's sister's child, but they're probably relations because you depend very much on your extended family to take care of you when you're sick, to take care of your children if something happened to you. Let's look at this one right here. On the 1835 census, David, there is a Samuel Carey, who I think is listed as being in Candy's Creek. And let's see, I'm listed here. Right here, it says Samuel Caney, C-A-N-N-E-Y, and there's somewhere it says Samuel Coney. Now, names can be so butchered. This could be a very different person than the Samuel Carey on the census, but I've looked at the census and that's what it says, but it doesn't mean that it's right and this is wrong, that this is right and that's wrong. But you go, this may be that person. Because spelling and writing, some of this is really sloppy. So you're always looking for anything to suggest. And if you have a suggestion, you've got to do the research and kind of come up with a reason why to believe one way or another. So let's go back. So that's searching just by the district. Now, you can also search by locations if the claim includes some kind of location. So there are gazillions, and there are gazillions of spelling. So, but benefit of Candy's, and I didn't intend this, was that it shows up early. So there's Candy, 2 E's S, Candy's I-E-S, C-A-N-D-Y-S, and Candy's near Hayers. So a claimant may have simply said this creek and didn't mention the district, or he could have said the district and didn't mention a place. So you can look here, these. This is a claim of young duck with Daniel Pigeon. Pheasant with an F, not a PH. Peggy Crittington, not Crittenden. Tarchichi. Now this is an index. So I will tell you, yes, I have made lots of mistakes in my life, and some of it is unintentional and some were clumsy. I will say this is not a mistake, but this is and interpretational error. So when you see these, so let's see. I have to look really close to read this. Down here at the bottom, it's always good when you look at the claim. It says, personally appeared before me Redbird and Jefferson Hare. But you look at the signatures and it says Redbird and Bellows. So who is who? Is Jefferson Hare Bellows? No, I don't think so. I thought he was. When I indexed this, I said, oh, it's Jefferson Hare, but he signed his name as Bellows. I think it was just a clerical mistake.
Are you saying that one of them might have been an interpreter?
I don't know, but it says Redbird and Jefferson Hare, but there's no, Jefferson Hare was Hare Conrad's son, and he could read English. So you go, did the clerk make a mistake, or was one of them an interpreter? There's not enough evidence in this, but you could say, okay, I'm going to look for every reference to Jefferson Hare. I'm going to look for every reference for Redbird. I'm going to look for every reference for Bellows and figure out from that. And I did that. And I do not think that Bellows and Jefferson Hare are the same person. So kind of be careful not to assume too much. Don't jump to a conclusion too quickly. You know, exhaust as much of your data as you can. I've said this before. I said I would keep a log of everything you look at, because you may not think something's important, and later on you'll figure out maybe that was important. Who was that person? Crow maker here is the same person as crow mocker, is the same person as crow marker. So the same person can be listed. Here's marker. And here is a claim by Bellows, simply as Bellows. So don't jump to too many quick intent, assumptions. So you keep a log. So I do it in Excel just because I like to shift and sort and look at stuff. And you start looking and saying, okay, what patterns do I see? Who connects to who on a claim? Who witnesses for who on a claim? Who doesn't witness for who on a claim? Who is this person? All of a sudden I have long-shell turtle. I don't know long-shell turtle. Where did I find long-shell turtle? Where does he show up? So, and you don't have to take it, there's no rush. You don't have to have this done by next weekend. There's no homework. So you just do stuff as you can do stuff. And all of a sudden you see your ancestors, the person you're looking for, within a community of a lot of people, 300 or 400 people. And you went from having 50 something names, on a census to having hundreds of names to work with. And you see a lot more vibrant community, a lot of connection, a lot of interaction. You can do names search, which can become tricky. And as long as you're willing to do that, this is what I want. Yeah. No. Share. Yeah. Search. No. Let's do that. Let's go to home. So you search for, we're going to search for the name Conrad. And this would be any claim where Conrad, mentioned Terrapin Head Conrad, Hare Conrad is a witness to Captain Oldfields, who also had a place on Candies Creek. There's Jackson Conrad, Daniel Conrad, Samuel Candy, that Jackson Conrad and Mike Waters were witnesses for, Richard Bart Foreman, that Jackson Conrad, and here's Conrad Hare. Now, I did make a mistake. When I went through my sort and built my spreadsheet, I did not find this claim. So you want to kind of search every way that you can. And I missed this by not focusing, just saying, okay, I've searched districts, I've searched locations, but I didn't necessarily catch this for whatever reason. I didn't. So that's why you keep a log. So here's Hare Conrad's appraisal. And he was paid for it. He also had down here a small other improvement at Red Clay, small cabin. And here's his claim. And you read between the two of them, and you realize this is the same place. So one of the things you can do is, if you find your ancestor or person, you can compare the information in each of the sources that you get. So in the 1835 census, there were 2 males over 18, 2 females over 16, 1 male under 18, 3 females under 16, 8 Cherokees, all were listed as half-bloods, 6 female slaves, 7 male slaves. There was 1 farm with 65 acres in cultivation and 12 houses. On the valuation, he said he was a full blood, which is right. I don't know. I suspect the valuation is that he was a full blood. 1 log house, 4 cabins, including the one at Red Clay, 6 other buildings, smokehouses, kitchens, stables, cribs, for 11 total buildings. So I'm looking at this and saying, I now think that this reference to houses isn't houses, it's structures. But that's just me. And there's not been enough research to do that. This said he had 65 acres, this says he has 100 acres. Which is right? I don't know. In the 1838 claim, said he had a dwelling, a kitchen, smokehouse, 2 stables, 2 corn cribs for 63¼ acres. So closer to what that said. So there's variations. Some may mean something, some may not. Clerks make mistakes. People make mistakes. So, but you can compare the two. The valuation gives a description. In the 1838 claim, he gave a description. So I'm going to interpret that he didn't think he got a fair value for his valuation. So Patsy, this gets right back to the question that you raised. Why would somebody file a claim if it had been valued? It's because I didn't agree with how they valued it. So he had a hewed log house, the valuation 20 by 22. That's exactly what his claim says. Hewed logs, good plank floor and doors, good shutter, stairs run up with 1 door and a closet door. It's the only 2-story house, and it doesn't really say it's 2 stories. It just says it has a stairs going up. So you assume then it is a 2-story house. Yes. Yeah.
Mike, if you go in the house, everything fits exactly.
Yeah.
The
differences between any of these measurements are negligible.
Right. The only difference is this says it was a brick chimney, and the house currently has a stone chimney.
Yeah. So
but Mrs. Neal, who maintained it, who died a year or so ago, at a few months short of 100, or I think less than a month short. she said that the brick chimney fell in the 1920s, and her father thought that a log house should have a stone chimney rather than a brick chimney. So he rebuilt the chimney out of stones.
And I don't know if, Jack, they made bricks themselves, you know, if they built a brick kiln, or they, you know, they bought it from somebody that shipped bricks in. I think bricks would be too expensive to ship in, but you never know.
Right, but I think at this time about everybody was making their own.
Making their own bricks, yeah.
Local clay. And also, an interesting part is that Bess Neal had the cabin renovated. It was placed on the National Register in the 1980s, and she was having it renovated and under, well, the National Register people that were watching or overseeing it. And so she was going to put shutters on the windows so she could close them. They said, no, cabins at that time did not have shutters normally. So she said, here it is. So we had the claim to show, and so she was able to install the shutters.
Yeah, yeah. Now the only thing in the 1838 claims he didn't, he included cherry trees, which weren't in his valuation, but he didn't include the cabins. These were, I suspect, the slave cabins. Because he was one of the,
I have a question.
Sure.
So is this claim from 1836 on the same property? Because I know some of the claims that I look at, they lived at a different place in 1835 than they did in 1838. But this is the same property?
This is, well, they may not have lived in a different place. They may have been in the same place, and the description, how they described the location, could be different.
No, these are claims that where you know, somebody removed them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In this claim, does
they
not,
came and took their land, and
in this claim, he doesn't say he was dispossessed. This claim right here, he didn't say he was dispossessed. A lot of the claims do. Well, they will say, I was dispossessed by a white person, or I was. Now, there is, Jack will have to tell me, I can't remember. It's in one of the acts of the Cherokee Nation in the 1820s, sometime, that they said that a Cherokee, so the nation owned the land, the real property. The Cherokee owned the improvements to the real land, including fields and fences and buildings. And that you could leave your property, and I think it was either a year or 2 years, that it was still yours. Somebody couldn't dispossess you of it. Another Cherokee couldn't just move in because you moved out. It was yours for a particular period of time, and after that, it was considered abandoned. And that improvement was available to anybody. And you'll see some references where a Cherokee will say, well, I sold it to such and such person, another Cherokee. So you could sell your possessory right to a space of land to another Cherokee. You couldn't legally sell it to a non-Cherokee, and they would do that.
And Mike, I think one thing that Anna's referring to is in 1836, the Cherokees were living in Georgia, but by 1838, they had been forced out of their homes in Georgia and had moved into East Tennessee.
Yeah.
So they filed, they didn't have a property valuation.
Exactly.
Or their new house or new improvements in Tennessee. So that was included on their 1838 claims.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'll find that in the 1842 claims too. So you kind of have to look at all the information they got. I would say there are broad generalizations, but I think you really got to look at each Cherokee and put together a timeline of what was happening to them. This is the Ocoee District land grants. Let's see this. Let me share this now. Let me share. Okay, this was the Cherokee land in Tennessee. There was so you can look at these, there aren't surveys, so there aren't roads, but there are things here. And this one, well, I'll tell you what, let's go back. This is right here, Candy's Creek. And it tells you on this who the white person was who got a land grant for that. Now, if you have a claim that names names, and yeah, there are those in there, I was dispossessed by so-and-so. So if that information exists in a claim, you may be able to find the specific area, very close area where that happened. May not. But going back to when we were looking at that USGS website, there are places that the white people didn't get land grants. There's a reason for that. Something's wrong with the land. Just because you can get a land grant doesn't mean you want that land. So again, it gives you a little bit better idea for where an ancestor may have lived and why they wouldn't be somewhere else. These are just some pages from what are called the returns of property. And these pages right here are all from Candy's Creek. Cherokee had some of their personal property sold for them at public auction by the United States before they immigrated. Now, interesting stuff, but when you're trying to, I guess, build a database, we'll say, is, well, who bought your ancestor's stuff? And who else does he buy stuff for? And did he become a land grantee? And where was his land, and how does that compare to where your ancestor lived? So he may have bought stuff left in the cabin that was an ancestor. It's a lot of work to go through and do, but it's another way of trying to zero in as close as you can to which specific place that your ancestor lived. So that's basically it. If you've got any more questions, ask away. I may not have the answers, but.
The returns of property and the register of payments, those are still in Washington, D.C.?
They are, yes, they are.
So we don't have those.
I have all the registers of payments. Actually, I do. I don't have all the returns of property. I have some of those. And the 1835 and 1836 were done by non-Cherokees. 1835 census was Henderson. It's who did Tennessee, and somebody different did every state.
Right.
They were not Cherokee. They had Cherokees with them as an interpreter usually.
Right.
1836, those were all, the valuing agents were all whites and employees of the, I don't know, I guess that would be been considered the military, the Cherokee Commission. They were all paid, and they had interpreters with them. But how good of a job they did, how hard they were, how honest they were, you don't really know.
Right. So then the 1838 claims are looking at what was done before and saying you didn't get it right.
Didn't get it right, or
Gotcha.
I was dispossessed and I was not paid.
Gotcha.
Or valued to me. So there's multiple scenarios. You just kind of have to look at every one. The 1842 claim probably arose, I think, out of the 1838 claims not having been adjudicated.
Okay.
They were simply, these 1838 claims were simply dismissed.
Hmm.
And there were second and third board claims, which I've never really researched other than the 1842 claims. And there are fourth board claims. And I have a lot on those. So there were lots of claims for lots of different reasons, lots of different letters that were written, lots of different documents. And no Cherokee matches another Cherokee. I mean, you're really, you're sometimes looking for the needle in the haystack.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just another tool to try to find another needle in the haystack, because it's always the last piece of information that you find, which is the one that makes everything else fall into place.
Awesome.
And I mean, all of those board members, all 4 boards were made up of non-Cherokees too.
Yeah.
But the value of these improvements were then deducted from the Cherokees' $5 million payment for their lands.
Yeah.
It wasn't federal government money, wasn't coming from the federal government other than the payment to the Cherokees for the value of the land.
Wait. The 5 million from the US, all of this was deducted from the 5 million?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
There's another question that I've wondered about too. If all of these claims had been accepted, could it have conceivably gone more than $5 million?
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't seem right.
Oh.
Shocking.
Does anybody know what the balance was after all the claims were paid out of the $5 million? Like, was there $560,000 left that went to the Cherokee Nation, or what? Do we know what that figure was?
Yes, we do. It's in, I don't have it in front of me, but we do have the calculations for that. And the amount that then went to the Cherokee Nation is what was paid in 1851 for the Drennan payment, the Drennan Road and the Chapman Road. So that was the amount that was left over after removal expenses, these expenses for the improvements. All of that was then distributed as a per capita payment in 1851.
So the 1851 payment didn't come from the federal government. It came from the leftover of the $5 million.
Yes.
I didn't know that. That's shocking almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it took them all those years to finally agree on the amount.
Michael, thank you so much.
And I think if you will look in the John Ross papers, I think around 1839 or so, I think the accounting, or maybe later, the accounting is in those, I believe.
Yeah, I've seen it. And David, that does not include, I think separately, I think, Jack, that the money that was paid to John Ross for running his detachments was outside of the treaty? Because it was an expensive.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I know there was a lot of dispute over how much he should have been paid.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a very unfair system, inequitable, to be sure.
But I think one important thing that people need to remember, that once the Cherokees took over under Ross, their own removal, that adequate food and all was provided on the road, that there was adequate provisions, whereas that wasn't necessarily so in the camps, and it certainly wasn't so when the federal government was to pay for a year's subsistence later. That's where all the problems comes in with the bad food and all of that later on. But under Ross, there was adequate provisions on the trail itself.
So it really is a sad story. And I would say it's not that there's no records. I think the challenge is how many records are there, and how do you really dig down when you're looking for specific people? And specific people when you don't really know how their names were spelled in a particular record. But it's just moving from where Glinda the Good Witch is and what you know to the direction of what you don't know. And you learn stuff along the way. And you go, now you got a real story to tell, and it's not something made up. You can say, this is what happened to my family.